Two 6-year-old twins call 911 because they heard their teenage sister screaming inside their billionaire stepfather's locked room. When the police arrive and enter the room, everyone is shocked. The late afternoon sun bathed the well-kept garden of the Thompson mansion, casting elongated shadows over the perfectly trimmed lawn. In the center of the yard, two small figures ran and laughed, their golden hair gleaming in the sunlight. Lucas and Olivia, the 6-year-old twins, were caught up in a lively game of tag, their joyful shouts echoing through the peaceful air of the wealthy suburb. Inside the house, through a second-floor window, Emma watched her younger siblings with a tired smile. The 16-year-old was leaning over a stack of books, her brown hair pulled up in a messy bun. She sighed, turning her attention back to the chemistry equations she was struggling to understand. The distant sound of the twins' laughter was a welcome distraction from the stress of her studies. Downstairs, Sophie Thompson hurried back and forth, tossing clothes into an open suitcase on the king-size bed. At 42, Sophie still maintained the elegance and beauty that had caught Robert Thompson's attention 5 years earlier. Her blue eyes, usually calm, now reflected a mixture of anxiety and excitement. "Robert," she called, her voice echoing through the house, "have you seen my phone charger?" From across the hallway, Robert's deep voice responded, "I already put it in your purse, darling." Sophie smiled, grateful for her husband's efficiency. Robert Thompson, at 51, was the very image of success. Tall, well-groomed, always impeccably dressed in expensive suits. His financial empire was both admired and envied in his social circles. Closing the suitcase, Sophie headed downstairs, finding Robert in the foyer. He greeted her with a quick kiss on the cheek. "Are you sure you'll be okay with the kids?" Sophie asked, the concern evident in her voice. "This business trip came up so suddenly." Robert smiled reassuringly. "Don't worry, darling. Emma can help with the twins, and I promise not to bury myself in work. Go and impress those investors." Sophie nodded, thankful for his support. In recent years, she had resumed her career in the corporate world, and this trip represented an important opportunity. She went out to the yard to say goodbye to the twins. Lucas and Olivia ran to her, their small hands clutching at her skirt. "Mommy, do you really have to go?" Olivia asked, her big blue eyes brimming with sadness. Sophie knelt, hugging them both. "Yes, my love, but I'll be back soon, I promise. Be good for Daddy, Robert, and Emma, okay?" Lucas nodded solemnly. "We'll take care of the house for you, Mom." With one last hug and kisses on their foreheads, Sophie stood up. Emma had come downstairs and was standing at the back door, watching the scene. "Emma, honey," Sophie called, "look after your siblings, okay? And don't study too much." Emma rolled her eyes playfully. "Got it, Mom. Have a good trip." With a final wave, Sophie got into the car waiting for her. As the vehicle pulled away, she watched in the rearview mirror the image of her family gathered in front of the house. Robert, tall and imposing, with an arm around Emma, and the twins waving excitedly. A stab of anxiety hit her, but she quickly pushed it aside. Everything would be fine. Back inside the house, Robert closed the door and turned to the children. "So who wants pizza for dinner?" The twins squealed with delight, while Emma merely smiled, grateful for a night off from cooking. "Great," Robert said, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "Emma, can you place the order? I have to finish a few things in my office before dinner." Emma nodded, watching as Robert climbed the stairs toward his private office. For a moment, she felt a strange unease, but she dismissed it, focusing on keeping the twins entertained while they waited for the pizza. The rest of the afternoon passed uneventfully. The twins played in the yard until dusk when Emma called them inside. Robert stayed in his office, the occasional sound of his voice on the phone the only sign of his presence. While helping Lucas and Olivia get ready for their bath, Emma couldn't help but notice the unusual silence that seemed to have settled over the house. It was as if Sophie's absence had created a vacuum, a subtle tension that hung in the air. Later, after a pizza dinner in the living room, Robert ate quickly before returning to his office. Emma put the twins to bed. Sitting between their two small beds in the room, lit by star-shaped lamps, she read them a story, her soft voice filling the quiet of the night. "Emma," Lucas murmured, already half asleep, "Daddy Robert seemed sad today." Emma hesitated, surprised by her brother's perception. "He's just busy with work, Luke, don't worry." Olivia was already softly snoring, her little face relaxed in slumber. Emma kissed both twins on their foreheads and quietly left the room. In the hallway, she paused for a moment in front of Robert's closed office door. The silence on the other side was oppressive. For an instant, Emma considered knocking, asking if everything was okay, but something held her back. With a sigh, she went back to her own room. Lying on her bed, staring at the ceiling, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The house felt different without her mother's comforting presence. Colder somehow. More dangerous. Shaking her head to dispel such irrational thoughts, Emma rolled onto her side, determined to sleep. Tomorrow would be another day, and she had an important test to prepare for. Outside, night closed in, enveloping the Thompson mansion in shadows. In the office, a light still shone under the door, and the muffled sound of papers rustling broke the silence. The seemingly normal afternoon had given way to a night laden with omens, the prelude to events that would forever change the lives of the house's inhabitants. Morning came quietly at the Thompson mansion. The rising sun cast golden rays through the silk curtains, creating dancing patterns on the marble floor of the foyer. Emma woke up early, her body tense with anxiety for the chemistry test ahead. Rubbing the sleep from her eyes, she got up, determined to make use of the extra study hours. The house was almost unnervingly silent, broken only by the occasional birdsong from the neatly tended garden. Emma wondered if this was how the mansion always sounded in the mornings, without the familiar commotion created by her mom making breakfast and hurrying everyone to start the day. Descending the stairs, her bare feet making soft sounds on the polished wooden steps, Emma was surprised to find the twins already awake. Lucas and Olivia were sitting on the living room sofa, their eyes glued to the television playing brightly colored cartoons. "Good morning, troublemakers," Emma said, her voice still husky from sleep. She ruffled Lucas's hair as she passed, getting only a groan in response. "Have you had breakfast yet?" "Daddy Robert made pancakes," Olivia answered excitedly, her large eyes finally leaving the screen to look at her older sister. They were delicious. Emma frowned, a strange feeling settling in her stomach. It was unusual for Robert to be up so early, especially to make breakfast. In the 5 years since he'd married her mother, Emma could count on one hand the times she'd seen him in the kitchen. Entering the immaculate kitchen, Emma found a stack of cold pancakes on the granite countertop. Next to the stack was a note stuck to the stainless steel fridge. "Emma, I need your help with some documents in the office after lunch. It's important." "Robert." A shiver ran down Emma's spine. Something about the tone of the note made her uneasy. The formality, the veiled urgency, it all seemed out of the ordinary. Shaking her head to clear the feeling, she poured herself some coffee and returned to her room, determined to focus on her studies. The morning hours passed slowly, marked by the ticking of the old hallway clock. Emma alternated between reviewing her chemistry notes and checking on the twins, who had migrated to the yard and were now playing in the afternoon sun. From time to time, she cast nervous glances at the closed door of Robert's office. The occasional sound of rustling papers and muffled phone conversations were the only signs of his presence. When the living room clock chimed noon, Emma went downstairs to make a quick lunch for the twins. Peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, Lucas and Olivia's favorites. She watched the children eat, their laughter and excited chatter about their yard games bringing a reluctant smile to her lips. After lunch, Emma hesitated in the hallway outside Robert's office. The silence on the other side of the door was oppressive, almost threatening. She took a deep breath, trying to calm her racing heart. "It's just paranoia," she muttered to herself. "There's nothing to worry about." With one last sigh, she knocked on the door. "Come in," Robert's voice sounded strangely tense. Emma turned the knob, the gentle creak of the door echoing in the silent hallway. Robert's office had always intimidated her, with its floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, the imposing mahogany desk, and the smell of leather and old paper. Today, though, the atmosphere felt even heavier. Robert sat behind his desk, piles of papers and folders covering its polished surface. His eyes, usually cold and calculating, held a feverish gleam that Emma had never seen before. "Close the door, Emma," Robert said. his voice controlled but with an underlying tension that made Emma's stomach tighten. Emma obeyed, the soft click of the door closing sounding like a final sentence in her ears. "You wanted my help with something?" she asked, proud that her voice remained steady despite the lump in her throat. Robert finally looked at her, his gaze hard and cold as steel. "Sit down, Emma," he ordered, indicating the chair in front of his desk. "We have a lot to discuss." With trembling legs, Emma sat down, her hands nervously gripping the fabric of her jeans. Robert slid a folder toward her, the sound of paper sliding over polished wood, oddly loud in the tense silence. "Open it," he ordered, his voice leaving no room for argument. With hesitant fingers, Emma opened the folder. Her eyes widened at the documents inside. They were bank statements, transfers to offshore accounts, contracts with unfamiliar names. Astronomical figures danced before her eyes, sums she could barely comprehend. "What is this?" she asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. Robert leaned forward, his eyes gleaming dangerously. "This, my dear stepdaughter, is the empire I built. Years of hard work, shrewd deals, and some creative maneuvers." He paused, studying Emma's face. "And you, unfortunately, found out too much." Emma's heart raced, pounding so hard she was sure Robert could hear it. "I don't understand." "Don't play dumb," Robert snarled, slamming his hand on the desk so hard that Emma jumped in her chair. "I know you've been snooping through my files. What else do you know? Who did you tell?" Emma cowered in the chair, fear flooding her like an icy wave. I didn't tell anyone, I swear." Memories of the past few days flooded her mind. The file she accidentally opened on Robert's computer when he asked her to print some documents for him. The strange figures, the suspicious transactions. At the time, she hadn't understood what she was seeing. But now, Robert stood abruptly, stomping around the desk. Emma shrank further, feeling cornered. The man she had known for years, the man her mother loved, suddenly seemed like a dangerous stranger. "You have no idea what kind of danger you're in, girl," Robert hissed, grabbing Emma's arm with force. His fingers dug into her soft skin, sure to leave marks. "If anyone finds out, if a single word of this gets out—" "You're hurting me," Emma cried, trying to pull free. Panic rose in her chest, threatening to suffocate her. In the hallway, Lucas and Olivia, who had come in to get a drink of water, froze at the sound of their sister's scream. Exchanging frightened looks, they crept toward the office door, their small hands clutching each other for comfort. Inside the office, the situation escalated quickly. Robert, losing the composure he always prided himself on, shook Emma violently. "You're going to keep quiet, got it? Or the consequences will be terrible for you and your precious family." Robert's threats echoed in Emma's ears, mingling with the sound of blood pounding in her temples. Images of her mom, of Lucas and Olivia, flashed through her mind. Her fear for herself was suddenly overshadowed by the terror of what Robert might do to them. In a moment of desperate clarity, Emma did the only thing she could think of. She filled her lungs and screamed as loud as she could. 911! Somebody call 911! Emma's shout echoed through the house, startling the twins. Lucas, always the braver of the two, grabbed Olivia's hand. "Come on," he whispered urgently. "We have to help Emma." Robert, momentarily stunned by the sudden scream, let go of Emma. She seized the opportunity to run toward the door, her heart pounding furiously. Freedom, safety, were only a few steps away. But Robert was faster. With a growl of anger, he grabbed her by the waist, throwing her to the floor with force. The air rushed out of Emma's lungs on impact, stars dancing in her vision. Outside, Lucas and Olivia heard the dull thud of Emma's body hitting the floor, followed by sounds of a struggle. Terrified, they tried to open the door, only to find it locked. "Emma, Emma!" Olivia shouted, pounding on the door with her small hands. Tears streamed down her round face, her fear for her older sister eclipsing her own terror. Inside the office, Emma fought desperately against Robert, who was trying to gag her with a silk tie. The soft fabric, once a symbol of wealth and power, had now become an instrument of forced silence. "I'll stop fighting, you little idiot," Robert snarled, his face red with effort and rage. "You're ruining everything." Emma writhed, kicked, and scratched, using every ounce of strength she possessed. But Robert was bigger, stronger, and the gravity of her situation hit her like a punch to the gut. He wasn't going to stop. He might kill her. "Hey, shut up, you little brats!" Robert shouted at the twins, his voice filled with a fury they had never heard before. "Go back to the yard right now, or I swear you'll regret it." Lucas, trembling with fear but determined to help his sister, pulled Olivia by the arm. "Come on, Liv, we have to call for help." They ran downstairs, the sound of the struggle in the office echoing behind them like a nightmare chasing their steps. In the living room, Lucas grabbed the landline phone, his hands shaking so badly he could hardly hold the receiver. "What's the number, Liv?" he asked, tears streaming down his freckled face. Panic threatened to overwhelm him, but his twin's terrified expression anchored him, reminding him he had to be strong. 911. Olivia sobbed, clinging to her brother's arm as though her life depended on it. Lucas dialed the numbers with trembling fingers, each beep on the keypad sounding deafening in the tense silence of the living room. After a few seconds that felt like an eternity, a calm voice answered. 911, what's your emergency?" Please help," Lucas stammered, the words tumbling out in a rush. "Daddy Robert is hurting Emma." "Calm down, sweetie," the voice on the other end said gently. "Can you tell me where you are?" Lucas looked at Olivia in panic, realizing he didn't know the exact address. They had never needed to know, always protected behind the estate's high walls. "The big mansion!" Olivia shouted, suddenly remembering how her mom described the house to visitors. "With the golden gate." "So okay, we're tracing your call," the operator said, her voice reassuring even through the children's panic. "Are you safe right now? Where is the man who's hurting your sister?" "In the office," Lucas answered, his voice shaking. "The door's locked and Emma's screaming." At that moment, a loud thump came from upstairs, followed by a muffled cry from Emma. The sound made the twins hug each other tighter, as though they could protect themselves from the horror unfolding above them. "The police are on their way," the operator assured them, though her voice sounded distant and unreal to the terrified children. "Can you hide somewhere safe?" Lucas looked around frantically, his eyes landing on the large closet under the stairs. It was where they usually hid during hide-and-seek, a place that had always felt safe and welcoming. "Come on, Liv," he whispered, pulling his sister toward the closet. They huddled together inside the cramped space, the door left slightly ajar so they could hear what was happening in the house. The familiar smell of cleaning supplies and stored winter coats was a surreal contrast to the terror of the situation. The sound of heavy footsteps descending the stairs made their hearts race. They pressed closer together, trying to make themselves as small as possible. "Here's Lucas, Olivia." Robert's booming voice echoed through the house in a way that made the twins tremble. "Where are you, you little demons?" Through the crack in the door, they saw Robert's legs pass by, his heavy steps causing the floor to vibrate slightly. His face, when briefly visible, was twisted into a mask of fury the twins hardly recognized. "Come out right now," Robert roared, his voice mixing anger and a hint of desperation. "If I have to look for you, it'll be much worse." For long minutes, which felt like hours to the terrified children, Robert searched the house. His voice swung between furious threats and falsely sweet promises, the contrast making it all the more frightening. The wail of sirens tore through the evening air, shattering the tension hanging over the Thompson mansion. Blue and red lights danced on the walls, casting ghostly shadows around the silent rooms. The screech of tires in the driveway announced the police's arrival. Lucas and Olivia, still curled up in the closet under the stairs, exchanged looks of relief and fear. The sounds of car doors slamming and authoritative voices issuing orders echoed through the property. "Police, open the door!" a deep voice boomed, followed by firm knocks at the front door. Upstairs, Robert froze, his face a mask of panic and fury. Emma, still locked in the office, felt such intense relief that her legs buckled. She slid down the wall, sobbing silently. The pounding at the front door grew more insistent. "Last chance, open the door or we'll break it down." In a final act of desperation, Robert ran to the office. "Emma," he hissed through the door, "if you say a single word, I swear your family will pay. Got it?" Emma, trembling, did not reply. The sound of splintering wood downstairs indicated the police had kept their promise. "Police, Show yourselves with your hands where we can see them." The sound of heavy footsteps climbing the stairs made Robert's heart race. He looked around frantically for an escape. There was none. In the closet, Lucas gathered every ounce of courage. "Come on, Liv," he whispered, holding his sister's hand. "We have to help Emma." Slowly, the two children emerged from their hiding place, just as the officers reached the top of the stairs. "Over there!" one of the officers yelled, pointing at the twins. Immediately, a female officer approached, kneeling to their level. "It's okay now," she said softly. "You're safe. Where is your sister?" Lucas, tears in his eyes, pointed down the hallway. In the office, Daddy Robert locked her in. While some officers headed to the office, others surrounded Robert, who had emerged from his hiding place with his hands raised, his face a mask of false innocence. "There must be some misunderstanding," he began, but was quickly silenced and handcuffed. In the office, the police knocked on the door. Emma Thompson, this is the police. Are you all right?" After a moment of silence, Emma's shaky voice answered, "Yes, the door's locked." At a signal from the team leader, one of the officers forced the lock. The door swung open, revealing Emma huddled in the corner, her face streaked with tears and a bruise beginning to form on her cheek. The scene that followed was one of controlled chaos. Paramedics were called to attend to Emma, while the officers began searching the office. That was when the true extent of Robert's crimes began to emerge. Drawers were opened, revealing stacks of incriminating documents. One officer turned on the computer, finding files detailing large-scale fraud schemes. With each new piece of evidence, Robert's face grew paler. Emma, wrapped in a shock blanket and being examined by the paramedics, watched the scene with a mix of relief and horror. Her eyes briefly met Robert's, and what she saw there, a mixture of rage, fear, and something that almost looked like pleading, made her shiver. "Miss Thompson," a detective approached gently, "I know you've been through a lot, but we need your statement. Can you tell us what happened?" Emma swallowed, casting a nervous glance at Robert, who was being led out of the office. "He can't hurt you anymore," the detective assured her. "You're safe now." With a trembling sigh, Emma began to speak. She told them how a few weeks ago she had accidentally come across some strange files on Robert's computer while searching for a school file she had emailed him to print. "I didn't understand everything," she said quietly. "But there were huge numbers, names of companies I'd never heard of, and instructions to transfer money to offshore accounts." The detective nodded, taking notes. "And what happened today?" Emma closed her eyes, the memories still fresh and painful. "He asked me to come to the office, said he needed help with some documents, but when I got here..." Her voice faltered. "He knew," she continued after a moment. "He knew I'd seen something. He started threatening me, saying that if I told anyone, our family would suffer. He got violent." While Emma continued her account, downstairs, Lucas and Olivia were gently questioned by a social worker. The children, still frightened, recounted the screams they heard and how they dialed 911. "You were very brave," the social worker said, offering a comforting smile. "You saved your sister." Outside the mansion, a crowd of curious neighbors had gathered, kept at a distance by police tape. Camera flashes and the murmurs of reporters indicated that news was already spreading. Back in the office, investigators made a shocking discovery. A safe hidden behind a painting contained not only more incriminating documents, but also a substantial amount of cash in various currencies and a collection of passports under different names, all with Robert's photo. "Chief," one of the officers called, holding up one of the passports, "I think we have a bigger problem than we thought. This man, he might not be who he says he is." The detective in charge frowned, the gravity of the situation deepening. He turned to Emma, who watched with wide eyes. "Miss Thompson, how long has Robert been your stepfather?" Emma blinked, confused by the question. 5 years. He married my mom when I was 11. Why?" The detective exchanged meaningful looks with his colleagues. "We need to speak with your mother as soon as possible. Do you know how we can reach her?" Emma nodded slowly. "She's on a business trip. She left the hotel number on the fridge." While one officer went off to find the number, the detective approached Emma again, his expression grave. "Emma, I know this is hard, but I need you to be strong for a bit longer. We have reason to believe that the man we know as Robert Thompson may have deceived not only you, but your mother as well. He might be part of a much larger criminal operation than we initially suspected. Emma felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. What do you mean? The detective sighed. We've found evidence of multiple identities, large-scale financial fraud, possible connections to international criminal organizations. Emma, the man you knew as your stepfather, he could be one of Europe's most wanted criminals. The words hit Emma like a punch to the stomach. Images of the last 5 years flashed through her mind. Robert smiling at his wedding to Sophie, helping the twins with their homework, giving Emma her first phone. All of it, a lie. Fresh tears welled in her eyes. My mom, she doesn't know any of this. She loves him. This will destroy her. The detective placed a comforting hand on Emma's shoulder. We'll handle everything step by step. For now, we need to take you to the hospital for a full checkup, okay? Your brothers will come with you. Emma nodded mechanically, feeling numb. As she was guided out of the office, she saw Robert being placed in a police car. For a moment, their eyes met. The man she had known as her stepfather, the man who had threatened her just hours ago, now looked small and defeated. Downstairs, Lucas and Olivia ran to hug Emma as soon as they saw her. The three siblings clung to each other, finding comfort in their union. We're taking you to the hospital now, the social worker said gently. You'll stay together, I promise. As they were guided into an ambulance, Emma couldn't help looking back at the house that had been her home for the past 5 years. The mansion, once a symbol of security and prosperity, now looked dark and menacing under the flashing lights of the police cars. On the way to the hospital, Emma held the twins' hands, her mind a storm of unanswered questions. How would her mother react? What would happen to them now? And more disturbingly, were there more secrets lurking in the life they thought they knew so well? The ambulance sped through the night, carrying them toward an uncertain future. Behind them, the Thompson mansion was still being searched, each new discovery adding layers to a mystery that was only beginning to unfold. At the station, Robert Thompson, or whatever his real name might be, was being processed. His rights were read, his fingerprints taken, his photo snapped. The man who once commanded a financial empire was now reduced to a booking number. Meanwhile, in an office at the station, the detective in charge of the case made frantic calls. Interpol, the FBI, agencies worldwide were being alerted. The Thompson case was quickly turning into an international investigation. At the hospital, Emma and the twins were greeted by a team of doctors and nurses. Physical exams were conducted, psychological evaluations begun. The social worker stayed with them, offering comfort and ensuring they remained together. In a private room, Emma finally had a moment to breathe. The twins, exhausted by the night's events, had fallen asleep on a makeshift bed next to hers. Looking at their innocent faces, Emma felt a rush of protective instinct so strong it nearly overwhelmed her. A soft knock on the door pulled her from her thoughts. The detective entered quietly, his face showing signs of fatigue, but also determination. "How are you feeling?" he asked gently. Emma shrugged, unable to put into words the whirlwind of emotions inside her. "I understand." The detective nodded. "Emma, I know it's a lot to process, but I need to ask you a few more questions. Is that okay?" Emma nodded slowly. "We managed to contact the hotel where your mother is staying," he began. "Unfortunately, she went out for a meeting and won't be back for a few hours. We left an urgent message for her to call us as soon as possible." Emma felt a knot in her stomach. Her mother, completely unaware of the chaos unfolding, was probably at some business dinner, smiling and making plans for a future that no longer existed. "What's going to happen now?" Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The detective sat on the edge of the bed, his face serious but kind. "In the coming days, there will be a lot happening. More questioning, deeper investigations. But I want you to know you and your brothers are safe. We will protect you." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "Emma, the man we know as Robert Thompson is at the center of a much larger investigation than we initially thought. The implications of what we found tonight could reach far beyond your family." Emma closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the world on her shoulders. "And my mom, what's going to happen to her?" Your mother isn't a suspect of any crime, the detective assured her. From what we know, she's as much a victim as you and your siblings, but she will have to go through extensive questioning. We need to fully understand how Robert, or whoever he is, managed to infiltrate your lives. Emma nodded, a million questions racing through her mind, but before she could voice any of them, a soft snore from Lucas distracted her. Looking at the sleeping twins, she felt a sudden wave of exhaustion. The detective, noticing her fatigue, stood up. You should rest now. There will be time for more questions tomorrow. An officer will be stationed outside your room all night. You're safe here. As he headed to the door, Emma called after him. Detective, thank you for saving us. He offered a tired but genuine smile. You saved yourselves, Emma. You and your siblings, you're stronger than you think. With that, he left, allowing Emma a moment alone with her thoughts and her sleeping brothers. Lying on the hospital bed, staring at the ceiling, Emma tried to process everything that had happened. In less than 24 hours, her life had been turned upside down. The man she called her stepfather for 5 years was a stranger, a criminal. Her mother. The phone rang, echoing down the sterile hospital corridors. The nurse at the station answered promptly, her voice calm and professional. Pediatric ward, how may I help you? On the other end of the line, a trembling, anxious female voice replied, This is Sophie Thompson. I got a message about my kids. Are they there? The nurse hesitated for a moment, recognizing the name. Mrs. Thompson, yes, your children are here. They're safe. The police are waiting to speak with you. When can you get here? I'm at the airport now, Sophie replied, her voice breaking. I'll be there in half an hour. Please tell my kids I'm coming. Hanging up the phone, Sophie rushed to the waiting taxi, her heart beating wildly. The drive to the hospital felt endless, each red light a torture. Her mind swirled with terrible possibilities, the few details she had learned insufficient to calm her panic. When she finally arrived at the hospital, Sophie practically leapt from the taxi before it had fully stopped. She ran to the reception, her heels clicking on the linoleum floor. My children, she gasped to the receptionist. Thompson, where are they? A police officer standing nearby approached. Mrs. Thompson, I'm Detective Martinez. Please come with me. Sophie followed the detective, bombarding her with questions. What happened? Are my kids okay? Where's Robert? Detective Martinez raised a hand, gently quieting her. Your children are physically fine, Mrs. Thompson, but there was a serious incident. Let's talk privately first, then I'll take you to them. Sophie felt her legs grow weak, but she nodded, following the detective into a small conference room. Inside, Martinez indicated a chair and sat facing Sophie. Mrs. Thompson, there's no easy way to say this, the detective began, her voice gentle but firm. Your husband, Robert Thompson, has been arrested. He's being charged with large-scale financial fraud and assaulting your daughter, Emma. Sophie's world seemed to crumble. She gripped the edge of the table, feeling dizzy. No, that can't be. There must be a mistake. Detective Martinez continued, explaining the events of the previous afternoon. Emma's discovery, the twins' brave call to 911, Robert's subsequent arrest. Sophie listened in a state of shock, silent tears rolling down her face. When the detective finished, she could only whisper, Can I see my kids now? Please. Martinez nodded, standing. Of course, they're anxious to see you. They walked in silence to the room where Emma was. Before entering, the detective gently stopped Sophie. Mrs. Thompson, be strong for them now. They've been through a lot. Sophie took a deep breath, wiped her tears, and went into the room. Emma lay in bed, appearing small and fragile against the hospital's white sheets. Her eyes widened when she saw her mother, and in an instant she reverted to the frightened girl who needed comfort. Mum, Emma sobbed, reaching out her arms. Sophie rushed to her daughter, embracing her tightly. Oh, my love, my baby, I'm here now, it's okay. For several minutes, mother and daughter remained like that, locked in an embrace, crying together. Sophie murmured words of comfort, stroking Emma's hair, while her own mind swirled with guilt and horror for what had happened. A small noise at the door made Sophie turn. Lucas and Olivia stood there holding hands, looking at their mum with a mix of relief and fear. Come here, my loves, Sophie called, opening her arms. The The twins ran to the bed, throwing themselves into their mother's arms. Sophie hugged them tightly, along with Emma, forming a protective circle around her children. "You were so brave," Sophie whispered, kissing the twins' heads. So brave." Lucas looked up, his eyes large and serious. "Mommy, is Daddy Robert bad?" Sophie's heart broke at the question. She hesitated, searching for the right words. "Robert did very bad things, honey, but what matters now is that we're together and safe." Olivia sniffed, burying her face in her mother's shoulder. "We were so scared, Mommy." "I know, my love," Sophie replied, gently rubbing her daughter's back. "But you were so strong, you saved Emma." Emma, who had remained silent, finally spoke, her voice rough. "Mom, I found out what Robert was doing. He's been doing terrible things. I should have told you earlier, but—" Sophie cut her off gently. "Shh, it's not your fault, sweetheart. None of this is your fault." The family stayed like that for a long time, hugging, each finding solace in the presence of the others. Sophie knew there was a long road ahead, full of hard questions, investigations, and likely a trial. But for that moment, all that mattered was that her children were safe in her arms. Eventually, Detective Martinez knocked softly on the door. "Mrs. Thompson, sorry to interrupt, but we need to discuss some practical matters." Sophie nodded, reluctant to leave her children, but knowing she had to deal with the reality of the situation. "The kids," she said softly, "I need to talk to the detective for a moment. Will you be okay here?" All three nodded, still clinging to each other. Emma, as the oldest, took on a protective air, pulling the twins closer. "We'll be fine, Mom," she said, her voice stronger now. "Go do what you have to do." Sophie kissed each of her children before following the detective out of the room. In the hallway, she allowed herself a moment of weakness, leaning against the wall and closing her eyes. "How are we going to get through this?" she whispered, more to herself than to the detective. Martinez placed a reassuring hand on Sophie's shoulder. "One day at a time, Mrs. Thompson. Your family is strong. You'll get through this together." Sophie opened her eyes, finding strength in the detective's certainty. She squared her shoulders, ready to face whatever came next. "Okay," she said, her voice gaining firmness. "What do we need to do now?" For several minutes, the family remained there, embraced in silence, each member drawing comfort and strength from one another. The hospital room, with its white walls and the soft beep of machines, felt like a world apart, a temporary refuge from the storm unfolding beyond its doors. Sophie gently stroked Emma's hair, while the twins nestled in her lap. The initial shock was beginning to give way to a deep exhaustion, but none of them wanted to part. "Mom," Emma finally broke the silence, her voice small and uncertain, "what happens now?" Sophie took a deep breath, searching for words of comfort and certainty she herself did not feel. "Now, my love, we'll look after each other. It's going to be tough for a while, but we're together, and that's what matters." Lucas raised his head, his large eyes filled with worry. "Are we going to have to leave our house?" The question caught Sophie by surprise. She hadn't even begun to consider the practical implications of what had happened. The mansion, the luxury cars, everything could be tied up in Robert's crimes. I don't know, sweetheart," she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "But it doesn't matter where we are, as long as we're together. We'll be home." Olivia, who had been silent until then, squeezed her mother's hand. "Can we have a dog in our new house?" The innocent question, so out of place compared to the gravity of their situation, brought a surprised laugh to Sophie. It was a gentle reminder that despite everything, they were still a family, with hopes and dreams for the future. "Maybe leave," Sophie smiled, kissing her daughter's forehead. "We'll see." The moment was interrupted by a soft knock on the door. Detective Martinez entered, her face a mask of professional compassion. "Mrs. Thompson, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there are some things we need to discuss." Sophie nodded, reluctant to leave her children's embrace, but knowing she had to face the reality of the situation. "Hi, kids," she said softly. "I need to speak with the detective for a moment. Will you be okay here?" Emma, adopting a protective stance, pulled the twins closer. "We'll be fine, Mom. Go do what you have to do." With one last hug and kisses on each child's forehead, Sophie followed the detective out of the room. In the hallway, she allowed herself a moment of vulnerability, leaning against the wall and closing her eyes. "How are we going to get through this?" she whispered, more to herself than to the detective. Martinez placed a reassuring hand on Sophie's shoulder. "One day at a time, Mrs. Thompson. Your family is strong. You'll get through this together." Sophie opened her eyes, drawing strength from the detective's certainty. She straightened her shoulders, prepared to face whatever lay ahead. "All right," she said, her voice growing more resolute. "What do we need to do now?" Detective Martinez's office felt small and stifling as Sophie sat down, her hands trembling slightly on the cup of coffee she'd been offered. Emma sat beside her, pale and silent, while the twins stayed in the next room under the social worker's care. "Mrs. Thompson," Martinez began, her voice gentle but firm, "I know this is difficult, but we need to discuss the details of Robert's crimes. It's important that you understand the extent of what happened." Sophie nodded slowly, feeling as though she were about to plunge into dark, unfamiliar waters. "I'm ready," she said, though her voice betrayed her uncertainty. Martinez opened a thick file on the table. "Robert Thompson is being charged with large-scale financial fraud, money laundering, tax evasion, and most recently, emotional abuse of a minor." The words hit Sophie like a punch to the gut. She glanced at Emma, who kept her eyes on the floor. "Robert's schemes date back at least 10 years, the detective continued. "He created a complex network of shell companies and offshore accounts to divert investors' funds and evade taxes." Sophie felt the world spin around her. 10 years ago, that was exactly when she had met Robert, shortly after becoming a widow. "All the money," Sophie began, her voice barely a whisper. "Yes," Martinez confirmed softly. "I'm afraid most, if not all, of the family's wealth comes from illegal activities." Emma finally lifted her eyes, her voice trembling as she broke the silence. "I discovered some documents a few weeks ago. I didn't understand everything, but I knew something was wrong. Robert, he caught me looking." Sophie turned to her daughter, horrified. "Oh, Emma." "He threatened me," Emma continued, words now pouring out in a rush. "He said if I told anyone, he'd hurt you and the twins. I was so scared, Mom. I'm so sorry." Sophie pulled Emma into a tight embrace, tears rolling down her face. "It's not your fault, my love. None of this is your fault." Detective Martinez gave them a moment before continuing. "Unfortunately, the news has already leaked to the press. The Thompson mansion is surrounded by reporters as we speak." The shiver of fear ran through Sophie. "Do the reporters know we're here now?" "No," Martinez assured her. "We're keeping your location confidential for the time being. But you need to be prepared for the public scrutiny to come." As if to underscore the point, Sophie's phone vibrated with a flood of notifications. Messages from friends and acquaintances, all wanting to know what was happening. The news was spreading like wildfire. "What do we do now?" Sophie asked, feeling completely lost. "For now, you'll stay in a safe location provided by the police," Martinez explained. "Tomorrow, we'll have to start dealing with legal matters. Most of your family's assets will likely be frozen during the investigation." The reality of the situation began to settle in. Sophie thought of the mansion, the luxury cars, the extravagant vacations, all built on lies and crimes. "Mom," Emma said softly, "what about school and the twins' friends?" The question brought on another wave of worries. How would they explain this to the children? How would they face the stares and whispers of the community? "We'll handle it one step at a time," Sophie replied, trying to sound more confident than she felt. "The most important thing is that we're together and safe." Just then, a knock on the door interrupted the conversation. An officer entered, looking nervous. "Detective, there's a situation outside. The press somehow found out the Thompson family is here. They're demanding a statement." Sophie felt panic rise in her chest. Martinez stood swiftly. "Don't worry," she assured them. "We'll get you out of here quietly. Officer, get the car ready at the back." Hastily escorted through the back corridors of the station, Sophie clung to Emma and the twins. Through a window, she glimpsed the crowd of reporters and cameras at the front of the building. It felt surreal, as though they were living someone else's nightmare. In the car, on their way to the safe location, Sophie finally had a moment to process everything. The life they knew, the security and comfort they took for granted, had all crumbled in a matter of hours. Emma, sitting next to her, took her hand. "We'll be okay, Mom," she said softly. We're strong." Sophie squeezed her daughter's hand, looking at the twins sleeping in the back seat. Yes, they were strong. They would have to be. As the car pulled away from the city, taking them to an uncertain future, Sophie made a silent promise. No matter what lay ahead, she would protect her family. They would weather the storm together and somehow find a way through it. The truth had come to light, exposing the lies and crimes that had sustained their life of luxury. But it had also revealed something else, the strength and resilience within each of them. It was that strength that would guide them through the difficult days to come. Dawn broke with a deceptive calm over the Thompson mansion. Under discreet escort by plainclothes officers, Sophie, Emma, and the twins entered the house they once called home. Their goal was simple and painful: retrieve only the essentials before leaving it all behind. Sophie walked through the familiar rooms with distant eyes, as though seeing everything for the first time. Every luxury object, every expensive piece of furniture now seemed tainted, a constant reminder of Robert's lies. "Mom," Emma's voice brought her back to the present. "What should we take?" Sophie blinked, forcing herself to focus. "Just the necessities, dear. Clothes, important documents, personal items that really mean something to you." The twins, Lucas and Olivia, clung to each other, watching their mother and older sister move through the house. Their large, frightened eyes followed every movement, as though they feared something terrible might happen again at any moment. "Can I take Mr. Cuddles?" Olivia asked timidly, holding her favorite teddy bear. Sophie felt her heart tighten. "Of course you can, sweetheart. Mr. Cuddles is definitely coming with us." In just a few hours, their lives had been reduced to a handful of suitcases and boxes. Detective Martinez, overseeing the process, approached Sophie with a grave expression. "Mrs. Thompson, I know this is hard, but we need to seal the house now. It's evidence in the investigation." Sophie nodded numbly. "I understand. Could we have a moment?" Martinez agreed silently, giving the family some privacy. Sophie gathered her children in the living room, where so many happy memories had been made. "Kids," she began, her voice trembling, "I know this is scary and confusing, but I want you to remember that no matter where we go, we'll be together. And that's what really matters." Emma, displaying a maturity beyond her years, hugged the twins. "We'll be okay," she said, though her voice betrayed a slight uncertainty. With one final look at the house that had been their home for so many years, the Thompson family left, leaving behind not just a mansion, but an entire life built on illusions. In the days that followed, the reality of their new situation began to settle in. Determined to maintain a semblance of normalcy for her children, Sophie rented a small two-bedroom apartment in a modest neighborhood. The contrast with their previous luxurious life was stark. The apartment was cramped, the furniture was basic, and though safe, the neighborhood was far from the exclusive environment they once knew. Sophie spent her evenings poring over stacks of documents, trying to understand the full extent of the financial damage Robert had caused. The debts were astronomical, and most of their assets had been frozen for investigation. "How are we going to pay for all this?" she murmured to herself one night, tears finally escaping after the children had gone to bed. The phone rang constantly with creditors demanding payment and lawyers offering their services. Sophie felt overwhelmed, but she knew she had to be strong for her children. Emma, meanwhile, had started intensive therapy. 3 times a week, she sat in a cozy office trying to untangle the knot of emotions suffocating her. "It's normal to feel angry," her therapist, Dr. Larson, assured her during a particularly difficult session. "Angry at Robert, angry at the situation, even angry at yourself for not speaking up sooner." Emma nodded, silent tears rolling down her face. "Sometimes I wonder if it's my fault. If I had told someone earlier." "Emma," Dr. Larson interrupted gently, "none of this is your fault. You were a victim and you did the best you could in an impossible situation." Slowly, session by session, Emma began to process the trauma and rebuild her confidence. For the twins, the transition was particularly challenging. Transferred to a new school, they faced not only the task of making new friends, but also the curious stares and whispers of classmates who had heard about the Thompson scandal in the news. "Why is everyone staring at us?" Lucas asked one day, coming home with slumped shoulders. Sophie knelt to his eye level. Sometimes people don't understand and become curious, but what matters is we know the truth and we have each other. Olivia, always the more sensitive of the two, often woke up in the middle of the night with nightmares. Sophie would find her curled up in bed, clutching Mr. Cuddles. "That's okay, my love," Sophie whispered, rocking her daughter. "Mommy's here, you're safe." Despite the difficulties, there were moments of brightness. The family discovered a new closeness, forced to rely on each other in a way they never had before. Simple dinners around the small kitchen table became precious moments of connection and laughter. One night, while helping Emma with her homework, Sophie was surprised by a genuine smile on her daughter's face. "What is it?" Sophie asked, curious. Emma shrugged, still smiling. "Nothing, it's just, despite everything, I'm glad we're together." Sophie felt her heart warm at those words. It was a reminder that even in the hardest circumstances, there was hope. As days turned into weeks, the Thompson family began finding their rhythm in their new reality. It wasn't easy, and every day brought new challenges, but they were facing them together. The future remained uncertain, with Robert's trial looming and countless legal and financial questions still unresolved. But Sophie knew that no matter what came next, they had the most important thing, each other. That night, as she prepared for bed, Sophie looked around the small apartment they now called home. It wasn't luxurious, nor what they were used to, but it was theirs. And at that moment, it was enough. The courtroom was crowded on that cold fall morning. Reporters swarmed the steps at the entrance, cameras in hand, eager to catch any glimpse of the Thompson family. Sophie, Emma, and the twins arrived discreetly through the back, escorted by officers. Inside the courtroom, the air was heavy with tension. Sophie sat rigidly in the front row, Emma beside her, the twins left in the care of a social worker outside. Sophie's heart thumped wildly as she waited for Robert's entrance. When the doors opened and Robert was brought in, handcuffed and wearing an orange prison uniform, Sophie felt as though the air had been sucked out of the room. He looked older, thinner, a shadow of the powerful man she thought she knew. For a brief moment, their eyes met, and Sophie felt a wave of conflicting emotions: anger, hurt, confusion, and surprisingly, a touch of pity. The judge entered and the room rose. Court is in session, case number 2025 CR 789, State versus Robert Thompson. The prosecutor, a sharp-eyed middle-aged woman, stood. "Your Honor, the state charges Robert Thompson with multiple crimes, including large-scale financial fraud, money laundering, tax evasion, and emotional abuse of a minor." As the prosecutor outlined Robert's crimes, Sophie felt like she was hearing about a stranger's life. Each new detail was a stab at her memories, eroding the image of the man she thought she loved. Emma, seated beside her mother, trembled slightly. Sophie held her hand, feeling the strength of her daughter's grip. Robert's defense attorney, a man in a flawless suit, argued that his client was a victim of circumstances and bad influences. "My client admits to having made mistakes, Your Honor, but he vehemently denies any abuse." Sophie felt Emma stiffen beside her. The mention of abuse brought back painful memories for both of them. As the trial progressed, more shocking details emerged. Secret accounts in tax havens, elaborate pyramid schemes, bribes to government officials. With each new revelation, Sophie felt like she was sinking deeper into a nightmare. "The prosecution calls Emma Thompson to the stand," the prosecutor announced. Sophie gave Emma's hand a reassuring squeeze before her daughter stood. With trembling steps but head held high, Emma walked to the stand. She avoided Robert's gaze as she took the oath. "Miss Thompson," the prosecutor began gently, "can you tell us about the day you discovered your stepfather's illegal activities?" Emma took a deep breath, her voice starting out soft but growing stronger as she spoke. She described how she accidentally found documents in Robert's office, how he caught her, and how he threatened her. He said if I told anyone he would hurt my mom and my brothers," Emma said, her voice cracking slightly. Sophie fought back tears, her heart breaking at the fear in her daughter's voice. When the defense attorney had his turn, his approach was aggressive. "Miss Thompson, isn't it true you were always jealous of your mother's relationship with my client? Could it be you misunderstood the situation because of those feelings?" "Objection," the prosecutor shouted. "Witness intimidation." "Overruled," the judge said. "But be careful, counselor." Emma, with a strength that surprised even herself, looked directly at the attorney. "No, sir, I didn't misunderstand anything. Robert threatened me. He made me afraid in my own home." For the first time since the trial began, Emma looked at Robert. Their eyes locked, and for a moment it was as though they were the only two people in the room. Robert looked away first, something like shame crossing his face. When Emma returned to her seat, Sophie hugged her tightly, murmuring words of pride and comfort. The rest of the day was a torrent of technical testimony. Forensic accountants detailing the complexities of Robert's financial schemes, investigators describing the evidence found. As the court adjourned for the day, Sophie felt drained, as though she had run an emotional marathon. Leaving the courthouse, she was surprised to find a small group of people holding signs of support. "We stand with you, Sophie," a woman shouted. "Stay strong, Emma," another voice called. It was a small gesture, but it meant a lot. Amid the chaos and public shame, there were people willing to show support. That evening, back in the cramped apartment, the family gathered in the tiny living room. The twins, sensing the heavy mood, huddled close to Sophie and Emma. "You were so brave today, Emma," Sophie said softly, stroking her daughter's hair. Emma gave a small, tired smile. "I felt strong up there, Mom, like I could finally tell the truth." Lucas looked up, his eyes wide and curious. "Is Daddy Robert going to jail?" Sophie hesitated, searching for the right words. "Probably, yes, honey. He did very bad things and has to face the consequences." "But we'll be okay, right?" Olivia asked, her voice small and unsure. Sophie pulled them all into a tight hug. "Yes, my love. It won't be easy, but we'll be okay. We have each other, and that's the most important thing." As the family embraced, Sophie felt a swirl of emotions. Sadness for what they had lost, anger for what Robert had done, but also a spark of hope. The trial was only just beginning, and a long road lay ahead. But in that moment, wrapped in her children's love, Sophie knew that somehow they would see it through together. The sound of boxes being dragged echoed through the small Thompson apartment as the family settled into their new home. It was a modest space on the third floor of an old building, but clean. 2 bedrooms, a living room, combined with the kitchen, and a cramped bathroom. A far cry from the spacious mansion they left behind. Sophie set down the last box in the middle of the living room, wiping sweat from her brow. She looked around, trying to see the potential in the tight space. The walls needed a fresh coat of paint, and the curtains were old and faded, but it was theirs. A fresh start. "Mom," Emma called from the kitchen, "where do I put the dishes?" "In the cabinet above the sink, sweetie," Sophie replied, moving to help her daughter. The twins, Lucas and Olivia, sat in the middle of the living room, unpacking a box of toys. Their expressions were a mix of curiosity and apprehension as they explored their new surroundings. "It's small here," Lucas observed, his voice a little sad. Sophie knelt beside him, running a hand through his hair. "It's different, honey, but you know what? It means we'll be closer to each other, like an adventure." Olivia looked up, her eyes brightening slightly. "Can we build a fort in the living room?" Sophie smiled, grateful for her children's resilience. "Sure, sweetie, as soon as we finish unpacking." As the day wore on, the apartment gradually took shape. Family photos were hung on the walls, colorful cushions brought life to the worn-out sofa, and the aroma of a simple dinner, pasta with tomato sauce, filled the air. Sitting around the small dining table that night, the family shared their first meal in their new home. The initial silence was broken by Emma. "I've made a decision," she said, setting her fork on her plate. "I want to study law." Sophie looked at her oldest daughter, surprised. "Law? Wow, Emma, that's a big decision." Emma nodded, her eyes shining with determination. "After everything we've been through, after seeing how the system works, I want to help other people who go through similar situations, other victims." Sophie's chest swelled with pride. Her daughter, who had been through so much, wanted to use her experience to make a difference. "If that's what you want, we'll make it happen." The twins looked at their sister with admiration. "You'll be a superhero lawyer," Olivia exclaimed, making everyone laugh. The next morning, Sophie got ready for her first day at her new job. It was an administrative assistant position at a small local business. Nothing glamorous, very different from her old life, but it was a start. "Remember, kids," she said, adjusting her simple blouse, "Grandma will pick you up for school. Be good, okay?" Emma, who was making breakfast for the twins, nodded. "Don't worry, Mom, I'll handle everything here." Sophie kissed each of her children before leaving, her heart heavy at leaving them behind, but determined to rebuild their lives. Her day at the new job was challenging. Sophie, used to a life of luxury and ease, now found herself making copies, answering phones, and organizing files. Her hands, once soft and well-maintained, now ached after hours of typing. But she pushed on, constantly reminding herself why she was doing this. Meanwhile, the twins faced their own challenge, the first day at their new school. Hand in hand, Lucas and Olivia walked timidly into their new classroom. "Class, these are Lucas and Olivia Thompson," the teacher introduced them gently. "Let's make them feel welcome, okay?" There were a few whispers among the students. The Thompson scandal had been in the news for weeks, and even kids weren't immune to the rumors. "Is it true your dad's in jail?" a boy asked bluntly during recess. Lucas tensed, but Olivia stepped forward. "He's not really our dad," she said, her voice small but firm, "and we don't want to talk about it." Sensing the situation, the teacher quickly intervened, steering the children back to a group activity. Gradually, over the course of the day, Lucas and Olivia began to open up, making a few early connections with their new classmates. That evening, reunited in their cramped apartment, the family shared stories about their day. "How was work, Mom?" Emma asked, helping set the table for dinner. Sophie sighed, rubbing her sore shoulders. "Different, challenging, but it'll get better with time." "Kate, what about school?" she asked the twins. Lucas and Olivia exchanged glances before Lucas spoke up. "It was okay. We made a new friend, Alex." Sophie smiled, thankful for this small progress. "That's great, sweeties. I'm glad you're settling in." As they ate, Sophie watched her family. Emma, her determined eyes fixed on the requirements for getting into law school. The twins, shyly sharing stories from their new classes. It wasn't the life she'd imagined for them, but there was a strength, an emerging resilience that filled her with hope. Later, with the children in bed, Sophie took a moment for quiet reflection. Sitting on the tiny balcony of the apartment, she gazed at the city lights, thinking about how their lives had changed. Robert's trial was still ongoing, the verdict pending, a constant shadow over them. But here, in this small apartment, they were slowly rebuilding their lives, brick by brick. Sophie closed her eyes, feeling the night breeze on her face. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but also new possibilities, and she was ready to face it, for herself and for her children. As she got ready for bed, Sophie made a silent promise to herself and her family. No matter what the future held, they would face it together. And somehow, in some way, they would not just survive, they would thrive. The courtroom was packed on the day of the verdict. Tension and anticipation filled the air as Sophie, Emma, and the twins took their usual seats. Weeks of testimony, evidence, and legal arguments had led to this crucial moment. Sophie held Emma's and the twins' hands, seeking comfort as much as giving it. Her eyes roamed over the room, taking in the now familiar faces who had become part of this new reality. Compassionate Detective Martinez, the relentless prosecutor, Robert's cunning defense attorney. The judge entered and everyone rose. "You may be seated," he announced, his grave voice echoing in the silent room. "Before we pronounce the verdict, there's a last-minute development to address." Sophie felt her stomach sink. What else could happen? "The prosecution would like to call a surprise witness," the prosecutor announced, standing. "We call Anne Sullivan to the stand." To Sophie's world seemed to freeze. Anne? Her sister? What was she doing here? A side door opened, and Anne entered, looking pale and shaken. Her eyes met Sophie's for a brief moment, filled with guilt and fear, before making her way to the stand. "Ms. Sullivan," the prosecutor began, "you have relevant information regarding this case that you wish to share with the court." Anne took a deep breath, her hands visibly trembling. "Yes," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I was an accomplice in Robert Thompson's crimes. A shocked murmur rippled through the courtroom. Sophie felt as though she'd been punched in the stomach. Emma squeezed her hand tighter, while the twins looked confused, not fully understanding what was happening. "Please elaborate," instructed the prosecutor. Anne began to speak, her voice gaining strength as the words flowed out. She revealed how years ago she had accidentally discovered some of Robert's illegal activities, but instead of turning him in, she saw a chance for profit. "I helped hide documents, make transactions," Anne confessed, tears streaming down her face. I manipulated Sophie into keeping it quiet. I told her Robert was a good man, that she was lucky to have him." Sophie closed her eyes, feeling sick. All those times Anne had encouraged her to trust Robert, to stay with him. All of it had been a lie. The prosecutor pressed on, extracting more details about Anne's involvement in Robert's schemes. With each revelation, Sophie felt as though parts of her past were being destroyed, once cherished memories now stained by betrayal. When Anne finished her testimony, the judge called for a recess. Emma guided Sophie out of the courtroom, her mind a whirlwind of emotions. In the hallway, away from prying eyes, Sophie finally broke down. Sobs shook her body as Emma held her, the twins clinging to Sophie's legs, frightened and confused. "How could she?" Sophie cried. "My own sister." Emma, displaying a strength beyond her years, cupped her mother's face in her hands. "Mom, look at me. It's not your fault. You didn't know. None of us knew." Lucas tugged on Sophie's sleeve. "Is Aunt Anne bad like Daddy Robert?" Sophie swallowed, struggling to find words for something she herself barely understood. "Aunt Anne, she did very bad things, honey. Sometimes even people we love can disappoint us." When court reconvened, the atmosphere was even more tense. Robert, who had remained expressionless throughout the trial, now looked defeated. To everyone's surprise, he stood up before the verdict was read. "Your Honor, if I may," he said, his voice rough, "I'd like to make a statement." To the judge, after a moment of consideration, nodded. Robert turned, his eyes finding Sophie and the children. I take full responsibility for everything. Anne, she only did what she did because I manipulated her, just like I manipulated everyone around me." He paused, swallowing hard. "Sophie, Emma, Lucas, Olivia, I'm sorry more than words can say. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I hope one day you'll find peace." The silence that followed was palpable. Sophie felt a storm of conflicted emotions, anger, pain, and an unexpected hint of pity for this man she once loved. Finally, the judge spoke. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" The jury foreperson rose, an envelope in hand. "Yes, Your Honor. In the case of the state versus Robert Thompson, how do you find?" "Found guilty on all counts." "And in the case of the state versus Anne Sullivan?" "Found guilty on all counts." Sophie closed her eyes, feeling a wave of conflicting emotions. Relief, sorrow, anger, all swirling in confusion. As the judge pronounced the sentences, long years in prison for both Robert and Anne, Sophie looked at her children. Emma, tears in her eyes, yet her chin held high. Lucas and Olivia, clutching each other, their young faces a blend of confusion and fear. In that moment, Sophie knew that despite the pain of betrayal, the lies and the losses, they still had each other. And that, in the end, was what mattered. When they left the courthouse that day, it was with a sense of closure but also of uncertainty. The verdict had been delivered, justice served, but the emotional consequences of this double betrayal were yet to come. Sophie wrapped her arms around her children, knowing the days ahead would be difficult. But together they would face whatever came. The truth had been revealed, blood ties tested, and now it was time to heal, to rebuild, to move forward, one step at a time. The small Thompson apartment was quiet that Saturday morning, save for the gentle clink of cups in the kitchen. Sophie brewed coffee, her movements mechanical, her mind elsewhere. 3 months had passed since the verdict, since the shocking revelation about Anne, and every day still felt like a battle. Emma entered the kitchen, her steps soft. "Morning, Mom," she said gently. "Don't forget I have the support group this afternoon." Sophie nodded, forcing a smile. "Of course, sweetie. What time are you coming back?" "Around 5, Emma replied, grabbing a cup of coffee. "Are the twins still asleep?" As if on cue, the sound of little footsteps echoed down the hallway. Lucas and Olivia appeared in their pajamas, hair rumpled. "Morning, my loves," Sophie said, her voice softening at the sight of her younger children. "Who wants pancakes?" As the family moved through their morning routine, Sophie couldn't help but notice the small changes. The twins' smiles, though still shy, seemed more frequent. Emma had a light in her eyes that hadn't been there before, yet the shadow of betrayal still loomed, a silent but persistent presence. Later that day, Sophie found herself seated across from Dr. Larson, the therapist she had begun seeing regularly since the trial. "How are you feeling today, Sophie?" Dr. Larson asked, her tone calm and inviting. Sophie sighed, fidgeting with the hem of her blouse. I'm not sure. Some days are better. Others..." She paused, searching for words. "Others, I wake up and forget everything for a moment, and then I remember, and it all comes crashing down again." Dr. Larson nodded sympathetically. "That's normal, Sophie. You've experienced a double betrayal, your husband and your sister. It takes time to process something like that." "But what about my kids?" Sophie asked, her voice cracking slightly. "They need me to be strong." "Being strong doesn't mean not feeling, Sophie," the therapist said gently. "Your children need to see it's okay not to be okay sometimes. Healing is a process." Meanwhile, across town, Emma was seated in a circle with other teenagers, all of whom had experienced family betrayals or abuse. "My name's Emma," she began, her voice trembling slightly, "and I'm here because I want you to know you're not alone." She shared her story, the eyes of the other teens fixed on her, some with tears, others with understanding and empathy. "What helped me," Emma continued, gaining confidence, "was realizing that what happened doesn't define me, that I can use this experience to grow, to help others." After the session, a younger girl approached Emma. "Thank you," she said timidly. "Hearing your story that made me feel less alone." Emma smiled, feeling a surge of purpose. This was why she wanted to study law, why she kept returning to these groups week after week, to make a difference, to turn her pain into something positive. Back at the apartment, the twins were on their own path to healing. Sophie watched them playing in the living room, building an elaborate block city. Look, Mom," Lucas called excitedly. "We built a courthouse." Sophie approached, noticing the care they had taken arranging the blocks. "It's beautiful, honey. Why a courthouse?" Olivia looked up, her eyes serious. "Because that's where bad people go, but also where good people help." Sophie felt her heart tighten. Even so young, her children were processing what they had lived through, finding ways to make sense of the world. "You're right," she said softly, kneeling beside them. "And you know what? Sometimes people who do bad things can learn and change." Lucas frowned thoughtfully, like Daddy Robert and Aunt Anne. Sophie hesitated, choosing her words. "Maybe. The important thing is that we learned and grew, and that we have each other." The twins smiled, returning to their game with renewed enthusiasm. Sophie watched them, marveling at their resilience, at their ability to find joy even after everything they had endured. That night, with the children in bed, Sophie allowed herself a moment of reflection. Sitting on the small balcony, she gazed at the stars, thinking about how much their lives had changed. The pain of betrayal was still there, a wound that would take time to fully heal. But there was also hope. Hope in Emma's smile when she talked about helping others, hope in the twins' laughter as they played, hope in her own heart that, despite everything, still found reasons to keep beating. The road to healing was long and sometimes hard. There were days of tears, anger, and questions, but there were also days of small victories, unexpected smiles, and hugs that spoke louder than words. Sophie took a deep breath, feeling the cool night air. Tomorrow would be another day, another step on this journey, and she was determined to face it, not just for herself, but for her children. Because if there was one thing Sophie Thompson had learned, it was that true strength didn't come from never falling, but from always getting back up. With that thought, she rose, ready for another day. The path to healing might be long, but they would walk it together, one day at a time, one step at a time. And in the end, she knew they would emerge stronger, wiser, and above all, united. The summer sun shone through the curtains of the Thompson family's small apartment. illuminating a scene very different from a year before. Sophie stood in the kitchen, making breakfast with a smile on her face, a notable shift from the worried expression that had become so familiar. "Emma, Lucas, Olivia, breakfast is ready," she called, placing a stack of pancakes on the table. Emma appeared first, her hair in a messy ponytail, a heavy book under her arm. "Morning, Mum," she said, planting a quick kiss on Sophie's cheek before sitting down. The twins weren't far behind, bursting into the kitchen with renewed energy. "Pancakes!" Lucas exclaimed, eyes shining with anticipation. As the family gathered around the table, Sophie reflected on how much had changed in the past year. The path had been hard, filled with emotional and financial hurdles, but they had persevered. "So," Sophie began, pouring juice for the twins. "Does anyone have special plans for today?" Emma glanced up from her book, excitement flickering in her eyes. "Actually, yes, I'm supposed to get the university's answer today." Sophie felt her heart quicken. Emma had applied to several law schools, but there was one in particular with a full-ride scholarship that was her dream. "I'm sure you'll be accepted, sweetheart," Sophie said, trying to keep her voice steady despite the anticipation she felt. Lucas, cheeks bulging with pancakes, spoke through a mouthful. "Emma's going to be the best lawyer ever." "Lucas, don't talk with your mouth full," Sophie gently scolded, though she couldn't hide a smile. The unconditional support among the siblings was one of the most beautiful things to emerge from their ordeal. Olivia, ever the observant one, looked at Sophie curiously. "Mom, you look happy today. Did something happen?" Sophie hesitated for a moment, wondering if she should share the news now. Deciding there was no reason to wait, she took a deep breath. "Actually, yes," she began, feeling all eyes on her. "I got a call from Mr. Johnson last night. I've been promoted to operations manager." The table erupted in celebration. Emma jumped up from her seat to hug her mother, while the twins squealed with delight. Mum, that's amazing," Emma exclaimed, her eyes shining with pride. Sophie smiled, feeling a wave of emotion. When she'd started that modest job a year ago, she never imagined she'd rise so quickly. But she had worked tirelessly, and now she was reaping the rewards. "Does this mean we can get a dog?" Olivia asked hopefully, causing everyone to laugh. "We'll see," Sophie replied, ruffling her daughter's hair. "For now, it means we'll have a little more financial stability." As they finished breakfast and prepared for the day, Sophie couldn't help but think of how each family member had grown in the past year. Emma, beyond her dedication to her studies and volunteer work with teens in similar situations, had become a strong, determined young woman. Her eyes, once clouded by sadness, now sparkled with purpose and hope. The twins, meanwhile, had surprised everyone with their resilience. At school, their teachers often praised not only their academic performance, but also their character. Lucas, once shy and withdrawn, was now known for standing up for classmates who were bullied. Olivia had discovered a talent for writing, using her stories to process her experiences. The day unfolded with a mix of routine and anticipation. Sophie headed to work, now with the exciting prospect of her new responsibilities. The twins went off to school, each carrying projects they were proud of, and Emma, nervous but determined, checked her email obsessively. Late in the afternoon, when everyone was home again, the moment they had all been waiting for finally arrived. Mom, Emma shouted from her bedroom. "The email's here." Sophie rushed into the room, the twins on her heels. Emma was seated at her computer, her finger hovering over the mouse, hesitant. "Go on, Emma," Lucas urged. "Open it." With one last look at her family, Emma clicked on the email. Her eyes scanned the text quickly. Suddenly, she covered her mouth with her hands, tears springing to her eyes. "I got it," she whispered, almost in disbelief. "I got the full scholarship." The ensuing celebration was deafening. Sophie hugged Emma tight, feeling as though her heart might burst with pride. The twins jumped around them, yelling in joy. Amid the commotion, Sophie's phone rang. She picked up, still laughing and crying at once. "Hello? Yes, this is Sophie Thompson," she said, trying to compose herself. As she listened, her expression shifted, from surprise to confusion and finally to relief. When she hung up, everyone looked at her curiously. "It was the lawyer," Sophie explained, her voice trembling with emotion. "Apparently not all the assets were tied to Robert's illegal activities. There's a substantial amount that was legitimate and can be recovered. The brief silence was quickly replaced by more cheering. It wasn't about the money itself, but what it represented, a chance to truly start over, to rebuild something new and honest. That night, gathered in the living room, the Thompson family reflected on how far they had come and how much they had grown. "You know," Sophie said, looking at her children with love, "a year ago I didn't know if we'd get through all this, but look at us now." Emma smiled, squeezing her mother's hand. "We're stronger than we thought." Lucas and Olivia, nestled between them, nodded solemnly. "We're a team," Olivia declared. "Say the best team," Lucas added. Sophie looked at her family, feeling a rush of gratitude and love so intense it took her breath away. They had faced the storm together and emerged on the other side, not just survivors, but victors. The future, which once seemed so uncertain and frightening, now shone with possibilities. New horizons opened before them, full of promise and hope, and together the Thompson family was ready to explore them, one step at a time, stronger and more united than ever. The summer sun bathed the porch of the Thompsons' new house, where Sophie sat, a cup of coffee in her hands and a serene smile on her face. 2 years had passed since the verdict that changed their lives, and the transformation was evident. The sound of hurried footsteps pulled her from her thoughts. Emma appeared, dressed in a smart suit, her eyes gleaming with youthful ambition. "Morning, Mum," she said, leaning in to plant a kiss on Sophie's cheek. "I'm running late for my internship. I can't believe it's already been a month." Sophie smiled proudly. Emma was not only excelling in law school, but she had also secured a coveted summer internship at one of the city's top law firms. "You'll do great, as always," Sophie replied, watching her oldest daughter dash off to the car. Moments later, Lucas and Olivia emerged, now 8 years old, carrying a large trophy between them. "Mum, where should we put this?" Lucas asked, his eyes shining with pride. Sophie stood up to take a closer look at the award. "Project on Courage," read the inscription. The twins had amazed everyone at school with their presentation, sharing their own story of overcoming adversity in a way that moved both students and teachers. "How about on the shelf in the living room?" Sophie suggested. "So everyone who visits can see how special you two are." Olivia nodded enthusiastically. "Can we tell Grandma about it when she calls tonight?" "Of course, sweetie," Sophie answered, feeling a pang of bittersweet emotion at the thought of her mother, who had been a pillar of support in their darkest times. As the children ran inside to put away the trophy, Sophie picked up her briefcase, preparing for her own busy day. Over the past 2 years, she had quickly climbed the corporate ladder, becoming a respected executive at a major tech company. In the car on her way to work, Sophie received a call from her assistant. "Mrs. Thompson, just confirming your keynote speech at next month's leadership conference," came the excited voice on the other end. "Thank you, Mark. Yes, please confirm," Sophie replied, feeling a mix of nerves and excitement. Being asked to speak about her journey of resilience and leadership was an honor she was still coming to terms with. Arriving at the office, Sophie was immediately swept into a series of meetings. Between discussions of market strategies and financial analyses, she found a moment to review her most ambitious personal project yet: launching her own financial consulting firm focused on ethical practices and transparency. Sophie, her mentor and now close friend Diane, called, entering her office at the end of the day. "I've heard rumors about your entrepreneurial plans. Is it really happening?" Sophie smiled, feeling a surge of determination. "Yes, I'm finalizing the business plan. After everything we went through, I feel it's my duty to use my experience to drive positive change in the industry." Diane nodded approvingly. "You've come a long way, Sophie. From a broken woman to an inspiring leader. I'm proud of you." Diane's words echoed in Sophie's mind on the drive home. She reflected on her journey, the nights of tears, the days of doubt, and how each challenge had forged her into a stronger version of herself. At home, Sophie was greeted by the smell of dinner cooking. Emma was in the kitchen, surrounded by law books, stirring a pot. "Hey, Mom," she greeted. "Hope you're hungry. The twins helped me make lasagna." Sophie felt her heart swell with love at the sight of her family, each contributing in their own way to the home they had rebuilt together. Over dinner, conversation flowed easily. Emma shared exciting stories from her internship. The twins talked about their summer vacation plans, and Sophie mentioned the upcoming leadership conference. "So, I almost forgot," Sophie said, pulling an envelope from her bag. "This arrived today." The atmosphere around the table shifted subtly when everyone recognized the handwriting on the envelope. It was from Anne. Sophie opened the letter carefully, reading aloud. "Dear Sophie and family, there are no words to adequately express how sorry I am for my actions and the harm I caused. I've spent the last 2 years reflecting deeply on my choices and their consequences. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I hope you know I am truly remorseful and committed to becoming a better person. If there's any chance for redemption, however small, I'm willing to do whatever it takes to earn back your trust. And with love and regret, Anne." A thoughtful silence fell over the table. Emma spoke first. "What do you think, Mom?" Sophie looked at each of her children, seeing the strength and compassion in their eyes. "I think," she began slowly, "that everyone deserves a second chance. It won't be easy, and it'll take time. But I'm willing to give Anne the chance to redeem herself." The twins exchanged glances before Lucas spoke up. "If you think it's right, Mom, we support you." Sophie felt a wave of pride in her children, in their maturity and capacity for forgiveness. Later that night, the family gathered in the living room. A world map lay open on the coffee table, surrounded by travel brochures. "So where to for our first international trip?" Sophie asked, feeling as excited as a child. "Italy!" Olivia shouted. "So I know Japan," Lucas insisted. Emma laughed. "How about somewhere in the middle, maybe Greece?" As they happily debated destinations, Sophie watched her family with a full heart. 2 years ago, an international trip seemed like an impossible dream. Now it was just one of many goals they were planning for the future. As the night wore on and travel plans took shape, Sophie found herself reflecting on the incredible journey they had taken. From a nightmare of betrayal and loss, they had emerged not just survivors, but victors. Emma, once a frightened teenager, was now a determined young woman poised to make a mark on the legal world. The twins, who had seen horrors no child should, now shone with resilience and empathy. And Sophie, who once felt utterly lost and betrayed, had transformed into a respected leader and an even stronger mother. When they finally prepared for bed, Sophie stopped on the porch once more, gazing at the stars. The future, which once seemed so dark and terrifying, now sparkled with infinite possibilities. "Mom?" Emma's voice brought her back to the present. "Everything okay?" Sophie turned, smiling at her daughter. "Everything's more than okay, sweetie. I'm just grateful for all we have and excited for what's ahead." Emma joined her, and soon the twins did as well, as if sensing this was a moment to be together. There, under the starry sky, the Thompson family embraced, united not just by blood but by a bond forged through shared adversity and triumph. They had risen from the ashes of their past, stronger and more united than ever. And as they looked to the future, it was with the certainty that together they could face any challenge life threw their way. The darkest chapter of their lives had closed, and a new one, bright, filled with promise, was just beginning.